Maya Carter never expected anything unusual from that warm afternoon by the ocean. The sky was clear, the water shifted in gentle waves, and the smell of salt drifted through the air, like it always did. For Maya, the pier had become a quiet escape, a place where she could sit with a book and let the hours pass without anyone disturbing her. It was simple, peaceful, and predictable, 3 things she loved more than she admitted that day. Though the air felt different. Not dangerous, just strange enough that she noticed. The breeze carried little bursts of cool air, even though the sun still shone bright on her skin. Maya looked up from her book every few minutes, watching the horizon. She wasn't sure why, but something made her feel alert, like a small voice inside her kept telling her stay awake. Pay attention. Families were scattered around the beach. Kids ran in and out of the water, shrieking with excitement every time the waves splashed higher than expected. Parents called after them, telling them not to go too far. A couple of teenagers played music near the rocks, laughing loudly. It was a normal scene, the kind Maya had grown up with. But as the hour passed, the waves started to shift. They weren't huge or violent, but they rolled heavier, rising a little taller each time. The calm rhythm of the ocean had taken on an unusual beat. Maya lowered her book and watched the water more closely. A woman packing up her family's blanket called out, "Storm's coming early. Let's get moving." Her husband nodded and started collecting toys from the sand. Other families began to do the same, folding chairs and shaking sand off towels. Maya checked her phone, expecting to see a storm warning, but the weather apps still showed clear skies. She frowned slightly, then shrugged. The coast was unpredictable sometimes. Still, she stayed a little longer. She wasn't ready to leave. She liked watching the water when it changed moods. Something about it always pulled her interest. A moment later, a distant sound drifted across the water. Maya paused. It was faint, so faint she almost thought she imagined it. She waited, listening carefully, eyes scanning the waves. Then she heard it again, a shout, or maybe a call for help. Her heart thumped once, hard. She stood from her seat on the pier, leaning forward to focus her eyes. From where she stood, the water looked empty. The kids who had been playing earlier were gone. No one seemed to be swimming. The beach was clearing out, but the sound had been real. She was sure of it. Maya hurried down the steps, from the pier to the sand. Her bare feet sank into the cool, damp shore as she walked toward the water. She scanned the distance again, squinting against the sunlight. There ahead, barely above the waves, her breath caught. The person was far, much farther than she expected anyone to be. And he wasn't swimming, he was struggling. Each wave pushed him down, and every time he resurfaced, his movements looked weaker. Maya whipped her head around. "Hey!" she called out to the remaining people nearby. Someone's out there. But the few people still packing up didn't hear her. Or maybe they didn't understand what she meant. A stronger wave crashed. And when Maya looked back, the man was almost completely gone from sight. Her chest tightened in panic. She knew she didn't have time to find help first, without another thought. She dropped her book, her bag, everything she carried, and sprinted into the water. The first shock of cold made her gasp. The ocean had shifted faster than she realized. The waves were stronger now, and the current tugged at her legs immediately. But she kept going step after step in, till she pushed forward and began to swim. Maya wasn't a professional swimmer, but she had grown up near the ocean her entire life. She knew how to move with the waves instead of against them. Still, the distance was far, much farther than she expected when she first ran in. "Hold on," she shouted, even though she doubted the man could hear her. Her arms pushed through the water, breath steady but strong. Each wave lifted her, then dropped her, making her fight to stay on course. She tried not to look behind her. Turning back would only remind her how far she had come. When she finally got close enough, she saw the man's face. His eyes were half closed, his movements slow. He slipped under the water just as she reached him. "No, no, no, no," Maya said breathlessly. She dove beneath the surface, the cold swallowing her whole. Her eyes stung from the salt, but she saw his arms sinking deeper. She kicked hard, grabbed him around the chest, and pulled with all her strength. Her lungs burned by the time she resurfaced with him. The man coughed once barely and started to slip again. "Stay with me," Maya said. Even though he didn't respond, she wrapped her arm tightly around his body and tried to guide them both toward the shore. But the current worked against her, dragging them sideways instead of forward. Every few seconds, a wave crashed against them, making her tighten her grip so she didn't lose him. Her muscles screamed for rest, but she pushed through it. Every tiny bit of progress felt like a war. She lifted her head between waves, searching for any sign that she was getting closer to land. At one point, she heard a whistle blow from the beach. Then she saw movement lifeguards running toward the water, pointing in her direction. Relief washed over her, but she didn't slow down. She kept swimming, holding the man's head above the water as best she could. The lifeguards jumped in and swam fast toward her. When they reached her, one of them shouted, "We've got him!" Maya felt the man's weight lift slightly as the lifeguard took over. Two others helped keep them steady as they began guiding all three back to shore. By the time her feet touched the sand again, Maya's legs nearly buckled. She stumbled forward, coughing from the seawater she had swallowed. Her chest ached, her arms trembled, and her throat felt raw. The lifeguards laid the man on the sand. Another staff member rushed over with medical equipment. People gathered at a distance, watching with worried faces. Maya stood there, dripping wet, unable to look away. She didn't know the man. She didn't know where he came from, why he was out so far, or how long he had been struggling. She only knew one thing: he had been seconds away from disappearing. One of the lifeguards glanced back at Maya. "You saved his life," he said softly. Maya shook her head. I just saw him. That's all." But deep down, she understood that if she hadn't been watching, if she hadn't listened to that strange feeling in her chest, the man might never have been found. An ambulance siren grew louder as it approached the beach. Paramedics rushed over, checking the man's pulse, lifting him onto a stretcher. Maya took a few steps forward, her eyes following him. He looked pale, fragile, completely unaware of the chaos around him. And yet, even from where she stood, Maya felt strangely connected to him. She hadn't spoken to him. She didn't know his name, but she had felt his fear when he slipped beneath the water, felt the weight of his body when he couldn't hold himself up. The paramedic turned to her. "Are you hurt?" Maya shook her head quickly. "I'm fine. You should get checked. I'm fine," she repeated. Though her voice shook, the paramedic nodded gently, understanding she wasn't ready to be fussed over. He climbed into the ambulance with the man, and moments later, the doors closed. The siren faded as the vehicle drove away. Maya stood there on the wet sand, alone except for the soft crash of waves behind her. Her clothes clung to her body, heavy with seawater. Her hair dripped down her back. Her hands were still trembling, but her mind kept replaying the moment she heard the first cry for help. The moment she saw the head disappearing under the waves, the moment she dove in before she even had time to think. Something told her this wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. The waves still crashed against the shore, but the scene had changed. Lifeguards moved quickly, shouting instructions to each other, checking equipment, and making sure the crowd stayed back. Maya's heart was still pounding, and her clothes were heavy with water, clinging to her skin. Her hair was soaked and matted to her neck. Every step she took toward the sand felt like dragging herself through a dream she couldn't wake from. She stayed close, unsure if she should leave or step forward, when one of the lifeguards finally spoke to her. "Hey, you did great out there. Are you okay?" Maya nodded, trying to steady her breath. "I'm fine. Is he going to be okay?" The lifeguard didn't answer immediately. Instead, he checked the man's pulse, listened for breathing, and then turned to another teammate. "We need to get him stabilized before transport. Watch, Hershey saved his life. She needs to be sure he's breathing and that everything is under control." Maya's legs felt weak, but she took a step closer anyway. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the man lying on the sand. He was pale, nearly unconscious, and shivering despite the warm afternoon sun. Salt water crusted his hair and eyelashes. He kept mumbling something that didn't make sense. "Stay with me," she whispered, even though he couldn't respond. Her voice was low, barely more than a breath, but she felt the words needed to be spoken. One of the paramedics arrived and knelt beside the man. She watched them check his airway, place an oxygen mask over his face, and gently lift his head. They spoke quietly, but the urgency in their voices was clear. "Okay, Maya, you need to step back a little. We're going to move him onto the stretcher now," the paramedic said kindly. Maya hesitated for a moment. She had been the one to bring him back from the water, the first to fight against the waves. Letting go felt strange, almost like leaving him alone, even though she knew trained professionals were now in charge. Slowly, she nodded and took a step back, her eyes still fixed on him. The lifeguards and paramedics worked quickly and efficiently. They lifted the man carefully onto the stretcher, supporting his head and limbs. Maya's stomach twisted as she watched him being carried. Even though he was in safe hands, seeing him motionless and shivering made her chest ache. A few bystanders whispered among themselves. One woman said, "Who is he? He looks important." Maya didn't answer. She didn't know, and she didn't care about that right now. All that mattered was that he was alive. The paramedic adjusted the oxygen mask and spoke gently to him. "It's okay, you're safe now. You're going to be fine. Just keep breathing for me." The man's lips moved slightly, forming words Maya couldn't catch. His body twitched every so often as he struggled to regain consciousness. Each time, Maya felt a jolt of worry run through her. Finally, the paramedic looked at her again. "You did everything right out there. He might not have made it without you." Maya shook her head, swallowing hard. I just did what anyone would do." The paramedic gave her a small, understanding smile. "Not everyone would. You didn't hesitate. That counts for a lot." The ambulance doors opened. The team carefully lifted the stretcher and secured the man inside. Maya followed to the edge, watching as they prepared him for the ride to the hospital. The hum of the engine started, and the vehicle slowly pulled away, leaving Maya standing on the wet sand, drenched and exhausted. Her mind was racing. She replayed the rescue over and over, remembering the waves, the way he had slipped under the water, and the fear in her chest that he might not make it. She had never felt anything like heightened adrenaline that left her body shaking even after the danger had passed. A lifeguard came over and handed her a towel. "Here, you need to warm up." Maya took it, wrapping it around herself, feeling the rough fabric absorb some of the salt water. She shivered, not entirely from the cold, but from the intensity of the moment. She had acted without thinking, driven by instinct. And yet, now that it was over, reality was setting in. She looked out at the ocean, still rolling its waves, indifferent to the chaos it had just caused. It seemed calm again, almost serene, but she knew better now. It could change in an instant. "Do you want to sit down for a moment?" one of the lifeguards asked. "You've been through a lot," Maya nodded. She moved to a nearby bench, settling down as the towel dried her just a little. Her hands were still trembling, but she forced them to rest on her lap. She tried to take deep breaths, but the image of the man struggling in the water kept flashing in her mind. She didn't even know his name. She didn't know anything about him, but she had seen him at his weakest moment. She had been there when he needed help the most. A few minutes later, a hospital staff member arrived at the beach. They had been informed that the man was being rushed in, and they wanted to get information about who had helped him. They approached Maya, clipboard in hand. "Hi, I'm from the hospital. We wanted to speak with you about the man who was rescued," the staff member said. Maya nodded hesitantly. I helped pull him out of the water." They jotted notes quickly. "Can you tell us exactly what happened? How far out was he? How did you manage to reach him?" Maya explained in detail, her voice quiet but steady. She spoke about the waves, the distance, the way he was struggling. She described how she had dropped everything and ran into the water without hesitation, and how she had kept him afloat until the lifeguards arrived. The staff member listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "You acted very bravely," they said sincerely. "You saved his life. We just want to make sure the hospital staff knows exactly what happened so we can provide the right care." Maya nodded again, still feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. She didn't want attention. She didn't want praise. She just wanted him to be okay. After they finished, The staff member handed her a small card. "If you need to contact us about the man, here's our number. And thank you again, truly." Maya slipped the card into her pocket and stood. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the lingering tension. The ocean looked peaceful again, but she couldn't stop looking at it. The memory of the man struggling, the panic in his eyes, and the sound of the waves hitting him stayed with her. She knew she would remember this moment for the rest of her life. Not because she'd been brave, but because she'd been present when someone's life hung in the balance. She had been part of something larger than herself, something that mattered in a way she couldn't fully explain as she walked back toward the pier. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the sand. The beach was mostly empty now, just a few lingering footprints and the sound of the waves. Maya's clothes were sticky with salt, her skin still cold, but she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had done what needed to be done, and that was enough for her. Even as she left the beach, the thought of the man stayed with her. She didn't know his story, his life, or where he came from. But she knew that something had shifted in her world. Something important had happened that day, and it wasn't over. Not yet. The hospital was quiet in the late afternoon, a soft hum of machines and footsteps filling the hallways. Maya sat in the waiting area, wrapped in a blanket the staff had given her. Her clothes had been changed into dry ones, but her hair was still damp from the earlier rescue. She stared at her hands, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. She didn't know his name. She didn't know anything about him. Yet she felt responsible for him, as though she had left a piece of herself in the water alongside him. Every few minutes, a nurse would come by, checking to see if she needed anything, offering water or snacks, and asking if she wanted to speak to the doctor. Maya politely declined each time, not because she didn't want answers, but because she wasn't sure she was ready. Finally, after what felt like hours, a man appeared at the doorway of the waiting area. He wore scrubs and had a calm, professional air. "Maya," he asked. "I'm Dr. Reed. I'm taking care of the man you rescued. Would you like to see him?" Maya hesitated. She wanted to, but fear twisted in her stomach. What if he didn't remember her? What if he didn't even care? "Yes," she said finally, her voice quiet. The doctor led her down a corridor. Past rooms where patients slept or received treatment. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, sharp and clean. They stopped in front of a room, and he gently pushed the door open. Inside, the man was lying in a hospital bed, sheets pulled up to his chest. His hair was damp and matted, and his skin was pale but slowly regaining color. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked around, confused and weak. Maya stepped forward instinctively. "You're awake," she said softly. The man's eyes focused on her, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. He tried to speak, but his voice was barely audible. "Thank you." Maya shook her head. "Don't thank me. You're alive. That's all that matters." He coughed weakly, and a nurse quickly came over with a small cup of water. He took it slowly, his hands trembling. Maya watched, feeling a strange mix of relief and concern. He was here, alive, and breathing. But he was still fragile, still struggling to recover from the ordeal. For a while, they simply sat in silence. Maya wasn't sure what to say. The man looked at her with eyes that seemed to search for words he couldn't find. She realized then that this was a person who had been completely powerless, completely dependent on someone else for survival. And she had been that someone. "You risked yourself," he whispered finally. "Why?" Maya shrugged, unsure how to explain. "I don't know, I just saw you struggling. I couldn't just watch." He nodded slowly, as though he understood in a way that went beyond words. I owe you my life." She shook her head again. "You don't owe me anything. Just stay safe from now on, okay?" He managed a small, tired smile, but then his eyes clouded with uncertainty. I can't explain why I was out there. It's complicated." Maya nodded. She didn't press. It didn't matter right now. The important thing was that he had survived. "That's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to explain anything yet." The nurse came in to check his vitals, and the man closed his eyes again, exhausted. Maya stood near the bed, unsure whether to leave or stay. She felt a strange connection to him, sensed that their lives had intertwined in a way that couldn't be undone. After the nurse left, the man opened his eyes again and looked at her with a more focused gaze. "You saved me," he said, his voice firmer now. "I don't know your name, Maya," she replied simply. "Maya Carter," he repeated it quietly, almost as if testing the sound of it. "Maya Carter. I will remember that." The doctor returned then, checking the man's chart. "He's stable now," he said to Maya, "but he needs rest and observation. You can stay a little longer if you want, but then you should head home." Maya nodded, sitting back down. She watched him sleep for a while, the steady rise and fall of his chest a reminder that he had survived. Her mind wandered, thinking about the waves, the way he had struggled, and the sheer randomness of the moment that had brought them together. As the hours passed, she noticed how people occasionally glanced at the room, whispering to each other. The man was clearly someone unusual, someone who had caught the attention of the staff beyond a typical patient. Maya tried not to think about it, focusing instead on the simple fact that he was alive. Eventually, the nurse returned with a cup of tea for Maya. "You should eat something," she said kindly. "You've been through a lot." Maya took it gratefully, sipping slowly as she sat by the bedside. The man stirred once, opening his eyes briefly before closing them again. She wondered what he was thinking, if he even knew what had happened, or why he had been out there alone. Hours slipped by quietly. The sun began to dip lower, casting warm light into the room. Maya remained near the man, not out of obligation, but because she felt a need to stay, to be present for him until he was fully safe. When the nurse returned to check vitals, she glanced at Maya. "You've been a calming presence for him," she said softly. "Even if he doesn't fully understand it yet, your being here matters." Maya nodded, unsure how to respond. She didn't feel heroic. She had just acted without thought, without plan. But hearing it said aloud made her heart swell with a quiet pride she hadn't expected. Finally, the doctor approached her again. "He's resting well now, and we'll continue to monitor him overnight. You should probably go home. You can visit tomorrow if you want." Maya hesitated, looking at the man one last time. She wanted to stay, wanted to make sure he was safe, but she knew she needed rest too. Reluctantly, she stood and stepped back. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. He opened his eyes again, a faint smile forming. "Thank you, Maya." As she left the room, the quiet of the hospital seemed heavier than when she had arrived. She walked down the corridor slowly, thinking about the day, the waves, and the way one simple choice to step in. To act had changed everything. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold. The world seemed calm again, almost as if nothing had happened. But Maya knew better. Something important had occurred, something that couldn't be undone or forgotten. A life had been saved, and in that moment, she had felt a connection she had never felt before. Walking home, she kept thinking about the man in the hospital bed. She didn't know him, she didn't know his story, and she certainly didn't know what the future held. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had acted when it mattered most. And that was a truth she would carry with her forever. The night was quiet as she reached her home, the ocean's distant roar echoing in her mind. She changed into dry clothes, ate a small meal, and sat by her window, staring out at the horizon. The water looked calm under the moonlight, gentle and inviting. She thought about the man she had saved, about how fragile life could be, and about the invisible threads that sometimes tied strangers together. Maya felt a strange mixture of exhaustion, relief, and anticipation. Something told her that this wasn't the end of the story. There was more to come, and she would find herself drawn back into it. Whether she was ready or not, she didn't sleep easily that night. Her dreams were filled with waves, with the man struggling, and her hands pulling him up, with the salty taste of water and the fear that had gripped her chest. But there was also a quiet warmth, a sense of purpose that lingered even when the adrenaline faded. By morning, she awoke with the sun streaming through her window. The world felt different, sharper somehow, as if the events of the previous day had changed her perception. She dressed quickly and prepared to head back to the hospital. A mixture of curiosity and concern driving her steps, She didn't know what she would find. Didn't know if the man would remember her or even recognize her. But she had to know. She had to see the person she had saved, to understand the life that had been spared, and perhaps to understand herself a little better in the process the next day. Maya arrived at the hospital earlier than she had intended. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm glow over the city streets. Her stomach felt tight with anticipation. She didn't know what to expect. Would the man remember her? Would he speak to her? She carried a small notebook in her bag, something she had started keeping after the rescue, to jot down her thoughts and feelings as she entered the hospital. The usual hum of activity was louder than before. Nurses and staff moved quickly through the corridors, their conversations hushed but urgent. Maya felt a small knot of unease in her chest. Something was different today. She could feel it. "Good morning, Maya," said a nurse she recognized from the previous day. "He's awake and wants to see you. Follow me." Maya followed the nurse down the familiar corridors, her heart beating faster with each step. They stopped outside a room, and the nurse gently opened the door. Maya peeked inside. The man was sitting up in bed, looking more alert than before. His clothes were neat, hospital-issued, but his posture carried a certain strength now. His eyes searched the room, and when they landed on her, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Maya?" he said, his voice steady but soft. She smiled, stepping closer. "I'm glad to see you awake and feeling better," he nodded, his gaze intense. "I'm feeling better, yes. Thanks to you." Before she could respond, there was a sudden commotion outside the room. The doors swung open, and several sharply dressed individuals entered. Their presence immediately commanded attention. Bodyguards, assistants, and people carrying tablets and folders moved purposefully into the room. Maya instinctively took a step back, unsure what was happening. The man in the bed noticed her confusion and sighed. "I suppose it's time," he said. One of the assistants, a woman with an air of authority, spoke up. "I apologize for the sudden entrance. We didn't want to alarm anyone. Maya, this is my team." The man looked at Maya with a small, rueful smile. "You should probably know. I am Evan Lawson." Maya blinked, taken aback. "Evan Lawson, the billionaire?" Evan nodded. "Yes. I prefer to keep a low profile, but I suppose the circumstances make that impossible now." Maya's mind struggled to process this revelation. She had rescued a man whose life had seemed fragile and ordinary just a day ago. Now she was standing in a hospital room with someone who was not only wealthy, but famous in ways she had never imagined. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. Evan shook his head. "There's nothing to say. You saved my life, and that is enough." The assistants moved closer, preparing to document the moment. Cameras were out of the question, they were too sensitive to the public eye. But phones and digital records were being readied. Evan looked at Maya with a mixture of apology and gratitude. "I wanted to keep this private," he explained, "but the world has a way of finding out these things. And you." He paused, looking directly at her. "You should know how much courage it took to act the way you did. Most people wouldn't have." Maya felt her cheeks warm. She had never considered herself brave. She had acted without thinking, purely on instinct. And now, standing here, hearing someone so powerful acknowledge her actions, she felt an unfamiliar mix of pride and disbelief. Evan continued, "I've always tried to stay out of the public eye. My work, my companies, they often make headlines, but I don't seek attention. Yet here we are." Maya nodded slowly, trying to absorb the information. "I didn't save you because of who you are," she said. "I didn't even know, I couldn't leave you." Evan smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "And that is why this is real. Not the fame, not the fortune. Just an act of kindness that changed both our lives." The assistants whispered among themselves, jotting down notes. They seemed almost amazed at the casual human way Evan spoke about the situation. As if he were trying to downplay the grandeur that surrounded him, Evan turned to one of them. "Let's make sure the news stays contained for now. This moment is not about publicity. It's about gratitude and recognition." One of the assistants, a younger man, nodded. "Understood, sir." Evan looked back at Maya. I want to meet the person who saved me properly. You deserve to know who I am, and I want you to understand how much this means to me and my family." Maya swallowed hard. She had never expected this. A simple act of saving someone had spiraled into something she could hardly comprehend. "I don't know what to say," she repeated. "You don't need to say anything," Evan reassured her. "Just know that you've made a difference, and that is enough for both of us." He paused, then gestured toward the window. "I suppose the view from here helps put things in perspective." Maya followed his gaze. Outside, the city stretched endlessly, buildings reaching for the sky. Cars moving in streams of color, and the distant ocean glimmering in the sunlight. It was a familiar sight, yet it felt different now, filtered through the lens of this extraordinary encounter. The assistants quietly left the room to give them some privacy. For the first time since arriving, Maya felt she could breathe without the weight of the world pressing in. Evan's expression softened. "I wanted to tell you everything, to explain why I was out there, but it's complicated. Not because it's dangerous, but because it involves things I can't share yet. What I can share is this. Your actions changed my life, and I will never forget it." Maya nodded, absorbing his words. The magnitude of the moment was overwhelming, yet there was a simplicity to it, a purity she hadn't expected. It wasn't about money or fame or power. It was about life, about courage, about connection. They sat together in silence for a while, watching the sunlight shift through the room. Maya's mind wandered back to the waves, to the fear she had felt, to the sheer instinct that had driven her into the water. She realized that, in that moment, nothing else had mattered. Not the ocean, not the distance, not even the danger. Only the person in need had mattered. Evan broke the silence. "I have a question for you," he said quietly. "Would you like to meet my family sometime? They should know the person who saved me." She had never imagined such a thing, meeting the family of someone she had rescued. It seemed surreal, almost impossible. "I don't know," she said slowly. "It's a lot to take in." "I understand," Evan said. "There's no rush. But I want you to know that this isn't just about a moment. It's about gratitude, and I want you to feel it fully." She nodded again, feeling a warmth in her chest she couldn't explain. It was as if the simple act of saving a life had created a bridge between two worlds she had never thought could connect. One world was hers, ordinary and quiet. The other was his, filled with power, influence, and responsibility. And somehow, they had met briefly but profoundly. The day passed slowly, with nurses checking on Evan and Maya sitting nearby. Occasionally, he would speak, telling her small details about his work, carefully avoiding anything that could compromise privacy. She listened, fascinated not by the business or the fame, but by the person beneath it all. There was a humility there, a recognition that life was fragile and precious, that even the wealthiest or most influential were still human, still vulnerable. By evening, the hospital had quieted. Visitors had gone, and the staff had completed their rounds. Maya stood to leave, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had come expecting a routine visit, and instead, she had witnessed a revelation that would stay with her forever. Evan stood by the bed, a small smile on his face. "Thank you, Maya," he said simply. "For everything. You don't need to thank me," she replied. "Stay safe," he nodded, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, two lives intertwined by a single, extraordinary moment. Outside the window, the city lights began to twinkle as darkness fell, and the ocean shimmered in the distance, indifferent yet eternal. As Maya walked out of the hospital, she felt the world had shifted slightly. Something had changed, something intangible but profound. She had rescued a stranger, and in doing so had become part of a story far larger than herself. And in that story, she realized there was more to come. Much more. Maya walked home from the hospital with a sense of awe lingering in her chest. The streets were quiet, the evening air cooled against her skin. She replayed the events of the past 2 days over and over in her mind. A simple act of helping a stranger had turned into something she could hardly believe. The man she had rescued, the one who had seemed so ordinary when struggling in the water, was someone extraordinary in ways she could never have imagined. She entered her home quietly, careful not to wake her younger sibling who was still asleep. The living room felt peaceful, ordinary, and comforting. Maya poured herself a glass of water and sat by the window, staring out at the horizon. The ocean stretched endlessly, calm and endless under the moonlight. She thought about how fragile life could be, how quickly it could change in an instant. Her phone buzzed softly, breaking her reverie. She picked it up and saw a message from an unknown number. It read simply, "Thank you for saving me." Maya stared at it for a long moment, then smiled. She didn't need more than that to feel the gravity of what had happened. But somehow, she knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, she received another message, this time with a request. Evan wanted to meet her family. He didn't want to just repay her, but to express his gratitude properly. Maya hesitated, unsure how to respond, but curiosity and a sense of responsibility won out. She agreed. Later that afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up to her modest home. 2 attendants stepped out, opening the doors and signaling for her to step inside. Maya's heart raced as she climbed into the vehicle. She wasn't entirely sure what to expect, but she trusted Evan's intentions. She had seen the humanity in him, even beneath the layer of wealth and influence. The drive to Evan's residence was quiet but comfortable. The city passed by in a blur, streets lined with trees, storefronts, and the occasional passerby. Maya felt a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had never been in a world like this, a world of wealth, security, and careful attention to detail. Yet, she felt oddly at ease, knowing that the person she had saved was inside this car with her. When they arrived, the residence was larger than anything she had ever seen. Gardens stretched out on either side of the driveway, and the building itself was modern and elegant, yet welcoming. Evan stepped out first, holding the door for her. He greeted her with a warm smile that made her feel comfortable despite the grandeur around her. Inside, the atmosphere was surprisingly homey. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, and personal touches filled the space. Evan led her to a sitting room where a few family members waited. Their eyes widened in recognition when they saw her, and for a moment, Maya felt a wave of intimidation. These were people who seemed larger than life, yet Evan's presence made the room feel familiar, human, and grounded. "Everyone, this is Maya Carter," Evan introduced. "She is the reason I am here today, and I want you all to meet her properly." Maya nodded, offering a small smile. She was greeted warmly, not with formality, but with genuine gratitude and curiosity. The family asked her about the rescue, about how she had acted, and listened intently as she recounted the events without embellishment. Maya tried to stay humble, but she felt a quiet pride swell inside her. Evan's younger sibling, a teenager like herself, leaned forward with wide eyes. "You really jumped in the water alone?" They asked. "Yes," Maya said simply. "I didn't think about it. I just knew I had to help." "That's incredible," they said, almost in awe. "I can't imagine doing that." Evan chuckled softly. "It's true. Not everyone would have. Maya has courage in a way I will always admire." The conversation shifted then, from recounting the rescue to casual topics. Maya found herself laughing at small jokes, sharing stories of her ordinary life, realizing how similar people were regardless of wealth or status. Evan's family treated her not as a visitor, but as someone important, and that made her feel both honored and slightly overwhelmed. After a while, Evan pulled her aside. "I want to do something for you," he said quietly. "Not as a payment, but as a token of my gratitude. I've arranged for a scholarship fund in your name, and I'd like you to have the first choice of where to apply it. And beyond that, I want you to know that whenever you need support, guidance, or opportunity, you can come to me." Maya was speechless. She had never expected anything like this. I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Then say nothing," Evan replied with a small smile. "Just know that your actions have had ripple effects far beyond what you can imagine. You've changed my life, and now, in some small way, I hope to change yours." The rest of the evening passed with stories, laughter, and a sense of connection that Maya hadn't anticipated. She realized that life was unpredictable, fragile, and precious. One moment, she had been sitting by the pier with a book, and the next, she had saved a life and met a world she never imagined. When it was time to leave, Evan walked her to the car. "Thank you, Maya," he said again, his voice sincere. "Not just for saving me, but for showing that humanity still matters in a world that can forget it." Maya smiled, feeling the weight of the words. "I didn't do it for praise," she said. "I just did what I could," he nodded. "And that is why it matters so much." As she drove home, Maya reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the waves, the fear she had felt, and the decision to act without hesitation. She thought about Evan, his humility, and the way he had acknowledged her actions. And she thought about her own life, how ordinary it seemed, yet how extraordinary it had become in just a few days. Over the next weeks, news of the incident spread quietly at first. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances began to learn about the rescue. But Maya was careful to keep the attention minimal, focusing instead on her studies, her family, and the small joys of everyday life. She stayed in touch with Evan, but only when necessary, letting their connection grow naturally and without pressure. Occasionally, she would receive a message from him, sharing a small update, a word of thanks, or a simple acknowledgement. Each message reminded her that life was fragile, yet full of unexpected opportunities for courage, kindness, and connection.